begin our year, intimacy, identity, inheritance, and we have crafted different ways to get that deep into the DNA and deep into the foundation of who we are as a house. And so we'll continue to do that. This year, we are doing 3 weeks of intimacy, identity, inheritance. And this morning, I want to talk to you about our identity in Christ. And so the reason that I love the way that it builds is that our identity in Christ flows directly from intimacy with God and through His Spirit and His presence in us. As we talked about last week, we have that as our reality. And for us to be able to walk in our God-given identity, we have to start in that place of intimacy and even that place of love that we talked about or as we worshiped this morning, that out of the foundation of this, out of the reality of this, is that any conversation we have about who we are in Christ is fully developed because of the life of Christ. The life and death and resurrection and enthronement and the outpouring of His Spirit is all because why? Because John 3:16 tells us, for God so loved the world that He sent His Son. And this is what the core of our belief is, that God loved and therefore He gave. And because He loved, He reconciled us into intimacy and into relationship like we talked about last week. But the driving force, God is love, and the driving force behind that was that we would know He loves us, and it is the cause of it is His love for us. And so we want that to be the reality of the revelation, of any revelation that we have of our identity, is that it comes from that place of love and it comes from the place of identity or of intimacy. And what intimacy does is it allows us to invite God to know us, and it gives us permission to be known by Him. And when we experience that level of intimacy, of knowing and being known, and we are not thrown away, and we are not having to hide, and we don't have to cover our past or our mistakes or our shortcomings or anything else with shame, and we come to a Father who invites us and says, come to me. And yet we come hesitant because we're coming to the Father and we aren't sure what the response is going to be. But when we discover that it is His invitation of love that draws us into intimacy, and when we are in that place of intimacy, standing before God, standing before our Father, that He is not throwing us away, that He is not to destroy us, He is not to turn His back on us, but to love us. And when we experience that kind of intimacy and that kind of love, that is where, when we're not thrown away, when we are known and when you are known to the depths of your story and everything about it, and you're not having to hide it, and then you discover that you are loved for who you are, where you are, then we can begin to talk about intimacy in that place, and the overflow of that intimacy, we can talk about your identity. Who are you? You are who the Father says you are. But first we have to learn to be able to stand before the Father and be known deeply and truly and experience that He is not throwing us away or turning His back on us, and that kind of love would bring us into a place of freedom, and we would get a glimpse and a taste of that freedom, and then we would desire and hunger for it in every other part of our life, in every other area of our life. And I know if you guys have kids, you're like me, and I mentioned this last week. As a father, my greatest desire is that my kids would know who they are and they would know that they're loved. And that's my goal as a father. And I want that, and I could fail at 100 different things, but when my kids are old enough to look back and reflect back at me, I want them to be able to say to me, Dad, because of the way that you raised me, I always knew that I was loved. I always knew that I was seen. I always knew that I was not known, and that you helped me discover who I am. That's our heart as parents, and I believe that is also God's heart for us as sons and daughters, is that we would know who we are and that we would know why He loves us so deeply, and we would get to experience that through intimacy. I think that's His heart, to know that we are loved and to know who we are.